بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Continuing with the salient qualities and characteristics of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu. So before Salatul Asr, we were looking at his inner qualities such as his wara, his humbleness, and also regarding his asceticism, i.e. zuhd. Now we're going to move on to another of Umar radiyallahu anhu's qualities, which is known as firasat. Umar radiyallahu anhu's firasat. Now what does firasat mean? If we have a look at the slide in front of us, he explains that firasat has got nothing to do with magic. So it's nothing to do with magic, it's got nothing to do with sihr, but one gains it from the grace of Allah, through wisdom, through sincerity, and through reflection. Now let me explain this point, firasat. Now firasat is an Arabic word, and it really means in English as insight, a vision. Knowing that the decision you're making now, you could see the benefits and the rewards of it later on. And I just gave an example before Salatul Asr of one of my teachers giving the firasat type of wisdom and judgment, encouraging the ulamas and the scholars to go into university. So it may seem a bit difficult or a bit more hard to understand at this moment in time, but later on you tend to see and reap its rewards and its benefits. So firasat, brothers and sisters, is this kind of insight, and this insight and this firasat you get through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not something which you can earn for. It's not like there's a degree for it that you get firasat, but it's something which is God-given, something which is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now I'll just go over the hadith there afterwards. There's been a misprint on the slide in front of you. The hadith which can be found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, beware of the firasat of a believer. It says behavior there, but it's actually believer, because he sees with the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in other words, beware of that judgment, that inner judgment given by pious people, where they are able to predict something in the future. And this is what is firasat, something which Umar radiyallahu anhu had in abundance. Now, let me just give you a practical example of a firasat of Umar radiyallahu anhu, because I think I could still see from the brothers' looks that some of you are probably still unsure what exactly firasat means. Now, let me give you an example. It's like saying you see someone and you are able to find out something about it. Think of that to be firasat. And sometimes it happens that you may look at someone, even though he may have a beard, even though he may be wearing the libas, even though he may be wearing the topi, and he may look religious and pious, but there are some people that when you look at them, you are able to determine or derive that he or she is arrogant, he or she is proud, he or she is so and so, she or she is such and such. That is called firasat. And an example of Umar radiyallahu anhu's firasat which can be found in his biographies is there was once a person called Aswad Anasi, who I talked about before. He was one of those who claimed to be a Nabi and a prophet. So Aswad Anasi, he lived in Yemen, and he claimed to be a Nabi and a Rasul. So he explains that there was a person called Abu Muslim. There was a person called Abu Muslim who went against Aswad Anasi and basically told him, you're a liar, and what you're doing, what you're claiming to be a prophet is totally untrue and false. So what Aswad Anasi, brothers and sisters, did was he lit a fire similar to the fire of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, and he threw Abu Muslim into the fire. Now Abu Muslim, when he went into the fire, he was exactly like Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ya naru kuni bardo wa salam. The fire became cool on Abu Muslim. Nothing happened, he was just relaxing with peace and content inside the fire. So Aswad Anasi then told Abu Muslim that, do you know what, you are causing a problem and a rift in my community, you might as well leave. So Abu Muslim then left Yemen and he went to Medina Munawwara. Now remember, Abu Muslim is a tabi, so he's not a sahaba, he hasn't seen Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he comes to Medina Munawwara, Umar radiallahu anhu, he looks at Abu Muslim. And when he looks at Abu Muslim, and this is what I mean by firasat, he looks at him, and by looking at him, he derives and he determines that Abu Muslim is someone really pious, something special about him. So Umar radiallahu anhu approaches Abu Muslim, and he asks him that, where are you from? Abu Muslim says, I'm from Yemen. Then Umar radiallahu anhu asks, are you from where Aswad Anasi is? Abu Muslim replies by saying yes. And then Umar radiallahu anhu says to Abu Muslim that there's something special about you. Tell me something about you. Why is there something special about you? So Abu Muslim then narrates the entire story, what Aswad Anasi did to him. So Umar radiallahu anhu, after he hears the story, he thanks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah, he thanks Allah, Umar radiallahu anhu, and he says that subhanallah, Allah has given me the tawfiq and the ability to see someone from the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, someone from the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon whom that which happened to Ibrahim alayhi salam happened to him. So he thanks Allah and he lets Abu Muslim stay and reside in Medina Munawwara. That's what I mean by firasat. That you look at someone and you're able to judge his piety, you're able to judge, may Allah forbid that he may look pious, but in reality he may be a munafiq or a hypocrite. That is called firasat. And this is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows, not just only on prophets and companions and tabis, also even now as well, that pious people, they have this kind of vision that they're able to see into people, they are able to look and see what may happen in the future, not through like ilm al-ghayb or knowledge of the unseen, but through experience, through tajruba, then that is called firasat. And subhanAllah, Umar radiallahu anhu had this in abundance. Some other qualities of Umar radiallahu anhu I mentioned there, that I mentioned this before, that he was muhdathun, he was the inspired one. Also Umar radiallahu anhu, he was a strong leader. Umar radiallahu anhu, he was given glad tidings of being a strong leader. And I'm just going to narrate to the brothers and sisters a very famous hadith about Umar radiallahu anhu being a strong leader. Now it is mentioned in a hadith which can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, that Rasulullah once had a dream. And in his dream, he saw Abu Quhafa, in other words, Abu Bakr al-Anhu, drawing or releasing the bucket into a well, and then Abu Bakr al-Anhu then pulling the bucket from the well. So he explains in the hadith of Bukhari and Muslim that وَفِي نَزْعِهِ ضُعْفٌ. In other words, when Abu Bakr al-Anhu was pulling the bucket from the well, he was pulling it, but it was very weakly. وَفِي نَزْعِهِ ضُعْفٌ. It was like slowly pushing at it, slowly he was pulling the bucket from the well. Then Rasulullah saw in his dream Umar radiallahu anhu then pulling a bucket from the well. And he goes to explain that one bucket which was inside the well then automatically became the size of 2 buckets. And Umar radiallahu anhu, when he was pulling the bucket from the well, this larger bucket now, he was pulling it really fast, to the extent that the people who were nearby were able to drink from the water, and also the camels were also able to drink from the water as well. So this was a dream Rasulullah had about Abu Bakr and about Umar. Now the interpretation Rasulullah gave regarding this dream, that Abu Bakr anhu pulling the bucket of water from the well, but it was very slowly, that is indicating that Abu Bakr anhu's khilafat will be, without doubt, there will be some problems there. He will have to fight the insurgents, he will have to settle the Muslim Ummah down. But Umar anhu, when he becomes the Khalifa, and him pulling out the buckets very quickly and hurriedly, is a sign that during Umar anhu's time, there will be a lot of what we call proactiveness, there will be a lot of effort, and also Umar anhu's Khilafat will be successful, that not only the people will be drinking the water, indicating that not only the people will be happy and satisfied, but even their progeny and even their animals and their livelihood will also be happy and successful as well. So look, Umar anhu pulling the bucket of water from the well hurriedly, Rasulullah interpreted that Umar anhu will be a very strong leader. Strong not in terms of strength, strong in terms of very forthright, and also such that everyone will listen to his decision, and there won't be, as I explained under session 2 or session 3, that there won't be any ikhtilaf or there won't be any kind of differences during Umar anhu's time. So that's another of Umar anhu's salient qualities that Rasulullah predicted, that Umar anhu would be a strong leader for the Muslims, and history shows that many of the reforms which we see, it all started from Sayyidina Umar anhu's time. Another of Sayyidina Umar anhu's qualities is mentioned here, is that Umar anhu had something called ghayrah. Now what does ghayrah mean? Now, sometimes some people, when they translate this word ghayrah in the translations of Bukhari or Sahih Muslim, they translate the word ghayrat as jealousy. That Umar anhu was jealous, or he had jealousy in his heart. But actually that is a very incorrect and a very untrue meaning of that word. Ghayrat, brothers, means guarding one's honor. Or to be more precise, ghayrat means that you don't want anyone participating in your beloved. That's what ghayrat means. We also use this word in Urdu as well, ghayrat, and the opposite of that is bear ghayrat, which means you don't want anyone participating in your beloved. And that's why, say for example, This word is used a lot when it comes to, say, husbands and wives. That when a husband doesn't, say, care regarding who his wife is in contact with, in terms of which men his wife is contacting, and he doesn't care or he's not bothered about that, we call such husbands bare ghayrat. That's what it means. They don't have the honor. They don't guard the honor. And Sayyidina Umar anhu, he had this called ghayrat. He didn't want anyone, say for example, participating in his beloved. Now normally we tend to use it for husband and wife examples, but it could be for anything. Anything, it could be anything. It could be, say for example, like the books which you have. So let's say you like your books and so on. So ghayrat here would be that you don't want anyone else to be using these books. It could be something personal, like a particular room you have in your house where you've got all your books there, you've got a library there, you don't want anyone else to enter the library other than you. So that's a form of ghayrat as well, guarding the honor. And Umar anhu had this in abundance. And there's a very famous hadith, I mentioned part of the hadith there in the slide, but the full hadith can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, that once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw in his dream that there was a woman performing wudu near the side of a castle. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a dream. Obviously he had a dream that he was in Jannah and paradise, and he saw a woman, she was performing wudu near the side of a castle. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the woman, this castle, who does that belong to? This castle, this usul, who does that belong to? So the woman in the dream said, this belongs to Umar al-Anhu. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then decided, oh, let me enter Umar al-Anhu's castle to see how he looks like. It's in Jannah, it's not, Umar's not there at the moment. So let me just open the door and see how he looks like. So after Allah, he wanted to enter, but then he remembered Umar al-Anhu's ghayra. He remembered that Umar al-Anhu, he doesn't like anyone mixing with his belongings or with his things. So this castle is for Umar in Jannah, in paradise. So Umar al-Anhu wanted to enter the castle to see what's inside. Then he remembered Umar al-Anhu's ghayra in this world, and he decided not to enter. So that's what we call ghayra, which Umar al-Anhu had in abundance. And as I said before, that this is a quality of every believer. Every believer should have ghayra. They should have that kind of honor for protection of family, protection of wives, protection of children, protection of students, protection of community. You should have the honor, this ghayrat, and Umar al-Anhu always had that. Some of the qualities about Umar al-Anhu which can be found in the books of hadith. There's a number of them, but I've just picked out some of them, and this is a very beautiful example, which in this occasion, parents in particular could take or understand a lot. Now, when we look at Umar al-Anhu's life, we sometimes get this, image of Umar al-Anhu being harsh, disciplinarian, strict, aggressive. We read just before Salat al-Asr that his other son, Abdul Rahman, was caught drinking alcohol, and he gave him a good lashing as well. So we get this image of Umar being too strict, too harsh, too rigid, not willing to meet with people, very straightforward, very blunt. But actually, when you really look deep into Umar al-Anhu's life, you will find Hazrat Umar al-Anhu, subhanAllah, even though the image he may portray to people, or people may portray it, Umar al-Anhu, he cared for people. He really, really cared for people, in particular for the widows and for the needy and the poor. And also at the same time, brothers and sisters, he also wanted his children and anyone, youngsters but children, his children in particular, how should I say, was cheerful or was happy in their happiness. So in other words, if his children or if his sons did something, he would also share in their enjoyment. And I mentioned this particular point when I was doing the Abu Bakr al-Anhu course last time, that a sign of a great leader. And a sign of a great leader, brothers and sisters, is that a leader, he will share in his people's joy and he will also grieve in their sorrows. That is a sign of a leader. So similarly, Umar al-Anhu, whenever his children or whenever his people would do something good, Umar al-Anhu would share in that enjoyment. And let's take an example of this very famous story I mentioned there. It can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari in various places. That once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was explaining to the Sahabas and the companions, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was giving a parable, a simile of a tree, and he said that I'm going to give an example of a tree which will be similar to a believer. Sometimes, when we are angry, or sometimes you hear a person may call somebody else, you're a donkey. Now, why does he call him a donkey for? What's the connection there? Is because donkeys are known to be foolish, so you're calling that person fool, you're calling him stupid. So you're not calling him the word fool or stupid, you're calling him a donkey because of that connection there. Sometimes we call someone a lion. So why do we call him a lion? Like Hazrat Hamza who known as the lion from the lions of Allah, Asadun min Asadillah. Why? Because of his bravery. So similarly, once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was giving an example of a tree, and he said that this is a parable of a believer, and he then asked the companions, which tree do you think I'm referring to? So Rasulullah was giving an example of one particular tree whose leaves do not fall and is similar to a Muslim. So he then asked the companions who were present there that, "O companions, which tree do you think I'm referring to?" So none of the companions said anything. They said, well, only Allah knows best. Now Abdullah bin Umar al-Anhu, i.e. Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab al-Anhu's son, and don't get mixed up, his name is Abdullah bin Umar. The other one who got lashed for alcohol was Abdul Rahman bin Umar. He is Abdullah bin Umar, who's well known for his narration of hadiths. So it came in his heart that the tree which Rasulullah was referring to is the date palm tree. That's the tree Rasulullah was referring to, Nakhla, the date palm tree. But Ibn Umar al-Anhu, because he was a young Sahabi and a young companion, he didn't want to say anything, so he just kept quiet. So Rasulullah asked again, does anybody know? No one responded. Then Rasulullah gave the answer, Innaha an-Nakhla, that it's a date palm tree. Now after the gathering finished, Ibn Umar al-Anhu said to his father Umar that, "Oh father, I knew the answer. I knew the answer of this tree. I knew it. It was Nakhla. But I was a bit scared and a bit embarrassed to say it because there were other big Sahabas around." So Umar al-Anhu said to his son Ibn Umar that if you had said it, if you had given the right answer, you would have been the most beloved to me than anything else in this world. Yeah, because he took pride at his son's learning, and like a father would have been that, if a father who sees his son or daughter, say, achieve something in life, naturally the parents become happy and they are joyous that, subhanAllah, my son is a hafiz, or my son is a scholar, or my son is a doctor, or my son is, naturally parents are happy with that. So similarly, Ibn Umar was saying that if he had got the answer, then you would have been the most beloved to me. Some of the qualities, moving along to the next part here, of Umar anhu. I'm just mentioning the cup of milk. What I mean by that is it's actually a dream which Rasulullah saw. And in this dream, Rasulullah saw that he was drinking milk. He was drinking milk, and thereafterwards he gave it to Umar anhu to drink. So Umar anhu then started drinking the milk. And the interpretation which was given by Rasulullah is that milk signifies ilm, knowledge. And Rasulullah drinking the milk and then passing it on to Umar anhu is to show and indicate Umar anhu's knowledge and deep understanding of Quran and Hadith. So that's one fazilat, one virtues of Hazrat Umar anhu, the cup of milk's dream indicating towards his ilm and his knowledge. Another of Umar anhu's virtues and fazilat is regarding the dragging of the qamis dream, the dragging of the shirt. Now again, this is indicating, this hadith can be found in Bukhari and Muslim, that once Rasulullah was sleeping, he had a dream. And in his dream, he saw some people, their qamis means their upper garment, was up to their chest. In other words, it started from the shoulder and it was up to the chest. He saw some other people, their qamis, their upper garment was from their shoulder all the way up to their waist. And then he saw Umar anhu in the dream, and his qamis was from the shoulder all the way down below his ankles. يَجُرُّ ثِيَابَهُ. So the interpretation Rasulullah gave for this dream is that the dragging of the qamis or the shirt means the same way milk indicates towards knowledge, shirts or qamis indicates towards deed. So Umar anhu's qamis, which was below his ankles, is indicating to Umar anhu's deen and piety. When I say deen, it means his religiousness, his God-fearingness, his taqwa and his piety. So it's indicating to Umar anhu's taqwa and piety. So that's like another virtue of Umar anhu. And the third one, which is a good one, that Shaitan was even scared of Umar anhu. Like this, how much robe and fear Umar anhu had, that even the devils and the Shaitan, he was scared of Umar anhu. And I'll just explain the hadith again, like when did Rasulullah say that Shaitan is scared of Umar anhu? And this hadith, brothers and sisters, again can be found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Once there were some women, they were in Rasulullah's house and they were speaking to Rasulullah. They were speaking to Rasulullah. Now Rasulullah was very soft and was very gentle. So sometimes women would come, they'll ask questions and they'll stay there. Sometimes they'll make demands to Rasulullah. And they won't go, they just kind of loiter around Prophet ﷺ's house. Sometimes they'll make complaints about their husbands, about this, about that. Naturally, sometimes tends to be the case. So they were just there around Prophet ﷺ's house. Now what happened, brothers and sisters, is that Umar anhu knocked on the door and he came into Rasulullah's house. Now, as soon as Umar anhu entered the house, the women, they all scurried away from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they hid behind the veil. They hid behind the parda. Now when Umar radiallahu anhu walks in, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam starts smiling. So Umar radiallahu anhu asks Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, why are you smiling for? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained that, I'm smiling because these women were in front of me, they were complaining, they weren't going. But as soon as you entered, they all scurried away and they are now all hiding behind the veil and the parda. So Umar al-Anhu then addresses the woman from behind the parda and he says to them that, Ya aduwati anfusihinna, which means that, oh enemies of yourself. Umar is saying this to the women, oh enemies of yourself, are you scared of me and you're not scared of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That I come in and then you're scared and you run away, but you're not scared of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the women replied by saying that yes, we are more scared of you, O Umar, than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because you're harsh, you're aggressive, you're strict. That's why we fear you more, we are scared of you more than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then joins the conversation and he says to Umar radiallahu anhu that Yabna Khattab wallazi nafsi biyadihi ma laqiyaka shaytanu salikan fajjan qattu illa salaka fajjan ghayra fajjik, which in other words means that, O Ibn Khattab, if shaitan was to meet you on one path, on one road, shaitan will be scared of you that instead of walking on the same road as you, he will then go to another road and he will take another path instead. So that is the hadith with regards to Umar radiallahu anhu, that even shaitan will be scared to walk on the same road, on the same path as Umar radiallahu anhu. So forget about women being scared of Umar radiallahu anhu, even shaitan, the devil himself, was scared of Umar radiallahu anhu. Obviously a lot of interpretations about why was he scared, in what way, because obviously everybody knows that everyone, Sahabas included, do have angel and a devil always with us. Obviously that's for hadith explanation, but what we can understand from here is that even shaitan was scared of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. Now the next point which I'm going to mention about Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. So alhamdulillah, we've looked at quite a few things regarding battles, regarding his qualities. Just now we've been looking at some of his virtues and fazilat. Now we're going to move on to the next point regarding Umar radiallahu anhu, which has got to do more regarding his like the way he led his people and some of the things about his caring nature and the way he showed mercy and raham and the way he cared for those who were vulnerable. Now the paragraph which you have in front of you, brothers and sisters, on the slide, talks about Umar radiallahu anhu's being a great leader, and he was strong in terms of there was no dissension during his time. It was as soon as Umar radiallahu anhu was martyred, that's when you had, brothers and sisters, ikhtilaf. That's when the ikhtilaf, and that's when the differences started. But during Umar radiallahu anhu's time, there was no such ikhtilaf, there was no such dissension, there was no such issues of such things or of such issues. Now, in that particular paragraph, I've mentioned a story. I'll probably come back to you later on, but I'll mention it briefly later, but I'll mention it here in a bit more detail. That Umar radiallahu anhu, he had a very trusted general with him. And everybody knows his name. I'm sure everybody's read books about him. And his name is Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. A great general, a great commander. And under his command, Islam spread to regions which were unimagined or unheard of. Talking about Persia, Iran, obviously modern day Iran, but in those days called Persia, all of Palestine, Syria, Egypt, all under one man's influence and command, and that was Khalid bin Walid radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Now we look at it later that Umar radiyallahu anhu was very strict when it came to what we call innovations. When it came to falsehood, that's why he is called Al-Faruq, differentiator between haqq and false. So when it came to falsehood, he was very strict. Now what happened was that even though Khalid bin Walid was a proper successful general, victories after victories, conquest after conquest, slowly some of the Sahaba, some of the Tabi'ins thought that if we have Khalid bin Walid in our ranks, guaranteed success, guaranteed victory. In other words, people were slowly losing the reliance and tawakkul in Allah, that it's Allah who grants victory. Success is granted by Allah and not by any individual, irrespective of how pious and how great he may be. Victory is only given by Allah. So many of the Sahabas were slowly, obviously unintentionally I'll say, were thinking, oh, we have Khalid bin Walid, guaranteed victory. There's no point of us turning up. We'll know we'll beat the enemies and we'll beat the disbelievers. Khalid bin Walid. So Umar realized that. So what he did was that he removed Khalid bin Walid from being a general, removed him from his post, and made Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah the next general in command. So look, Umar finding that people were relying on Khalid bin Walid too much, removed Khalid bin Walid and made Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah the next commander and the next general. Now you tell me, if Umar didn't have respect amongst his seniors, if Umar did not have control over his people, you try removing a successful general and you'll see there will be civil war in that country. You'll see that. If you don't have control and then you try to remove someone from his post who is successful, who has a bit of charisma like Khalid bin Walid who had, then you'll see everyone, there will be a backlash. Everyone will go against you, thinking, what kind of Amir you are? You're removing the best general we've had in years. You're removing him, you're firing him. There would be backlash. But subhanAllah, when Umar when he removed Khalid bin Walid no one made any kind of objections. No one said anything. They understood Umar anhu's reason, and basically there was no dissension at all. Because they believed and trusted in Umar anhu. That's what the first part of the paragraph explains. They had confidence in him, and he gave people confidence. Subhanallah. So when he made such a decision, remember, you need to understand, this is a proper decision of great magnitude. But even then, people didn't go against Umar adl. There was no dissension, there was no ikhtilaf. Umar adl made the decision, and everybody listened to him. Everybody said, Sami'na wa ta'ana, we listen and we obey. And this was Umar adl anhu's control he had of his people. Now the next point which I'm going to mention here, moving along to some of the initiatives Umar al-Anhu started. This will be a good one for brothers and sisters nowadays regarding obesity. He even started a kind of a nationwide health campaign, like they do nowadays, like a campaign to make sure people are not eating too much biryanis or too many sandwiches and so on. So basically, he also started a campaign as well regarding obesity. Now, Hazrat Umar al-Anhu, he would actually encourage people to fast, to eat less, and he would also encourage people to look after their health. And there's a story here that once Umar al-Anhu, he saw a man with a big belly, like fat, he had a big belly. So Umar al-Anhu asked him that, why do you have a big belly for? The man said, this is a blessing from Allah. The man replied by saying that having a big belly, is a ni'mat from Allah. Which, when you look at it, obviously he's not wrong, because obviously the food, the biryanis, the sandwiches and so on, the crisps and everything, is all blessings from Allah. So he was saying that this is a blessing from Allah. So Umar al-Anhu turned around and said to him that no, rather it is a punishment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That eating too much and not obviously exercising and also not looking after your health, this is actually a azab from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's true, looking at it from a more serious point of view, that obesity, these kind of things, many of the illnesses, unfortunately, find that many Asians, the illnesses they have is because of obesity, because they're overweight, and that leads to high this, high that, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high this, high that, and many of them do end up having heart attacks and these things. So, subhanAllah, this is Umar al-Anhu, we're talking about, this is 1400 years ago, Umar al-Anhu understood the dangers of eating too much. So, obviously nowadays everybody knows that, because obviously we've been taught, but this, and when you look at nowadays, I mean just like last 10, 20 years, doctors said, you should go exercise and, go to the gyms and so on. Even before 30, 40 years ago in the UK, there wasn't that drive and that push to kind of lose weight. Now, obviously there is. Umar al-Anhu 1400 years ago understood the dangers of eating too much. Now again, what I'm trying to say here, the reason I brought this here, look, this is Umar al-Anhu caring for his people, subhanAllah. You're probably thinking that he's the Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers. The last thing you probably think about is people's health. Normally think about states and battles and revenues and where to distribute it. SubhanAllah, he even had time to care about people's health and people eating and drinking. That is why we call Umar al-Anhu Amir al-Mu'mineen. Cared for his people so much. If they ate too much, he would actually tell them not to, and he would encourage them to train and to work hard. So this is all Umar al-Anhu caring for his people. Moving on to the next part of the paragraph. Again, I kind of briefly mentioned just now that Umar al-Anhu was very strict when it came to falsehood and innovations. So whenever he saw any kind of bid'ah, innovations, he would straight away put a stop to it. Now there's three innovations we're going to be looking at here. Number three, we've already touched on before, only Allah grants victory, referring to the Khalid bin Walid story. Let's have a look at number one and number two. Number one is a very famous story, I'm sure you must have heard or read before. Now, when Umar al-Anhu conquered, or under his reign, Egypt was conquered, Amr bin As al-Anhu was made the governor of Egypt. And I've already touched on Amr bin As. You remember later on, he lost his job for not punishing Abdurrahman bin Umar in public. So the governor at that time was Amr bin As. Now I'm sure you must have heard of this story, that the people of Egypt had this superstitious belief about the river Nile. What they believed was that every year they have to throw a virgin girl into the river Nile, and throwing a virgin girl into the river Nile causes the Nile to flow. And if they don't offer this human sacrifice, the Nile would not flow. And you can imagine, even now it's a big massive river, but nowadays, in those days, that was the only source of water. So it was this superstitious belief they had. So now when the Muslims conquered Egypt, Umar bin As, the governor, and when he heard of this superstitious belief that this is what the people of Egypt do, he straight away said to him, no, I'm not going to allow this. What kind of belief is that, throwing a virgin girl into the river Nile, drowning her, killing her, and then thinking that that is making the Nile flow? So Umar bin As said, I'm not going to allow this. And he wrote a letter to Umar ibn Anhu. Now Umar ibn Anhu then wrote a letter back, but with the letter, he also wrote a card, like he wrote on a piece of card, the following paragraph, where he's basically saying to the river Nile, that, oh Nile, if you flow out of your own will and power, then do not flow, for in that case we do not have any need for you. He wrote this on a piece of card, that if you're flowing out of your own will, then stop flowing, we don't need you. But if you are flowing by the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make you flow. And he told Amr bin As to throw this card into the river Nile. As soon as the card went inside the river Nile, the Nile burst its banks. Before it was smaller, now everybody's seen is massive and big. So that, the vastness of the Nile, or the increased number of water, started when Umar ibn Anhu threw that, well, not he threw it, but when Amr bin As threw that card of Umar ibn Anhu into the river Nile. So from there, the river Nile burst its banks and the water started flowing and gushing. So this is Umar ibn Anhu, to a certain extent, having control over the river Nile. So him telling the river Nile to flow. If you're flowing out of Allah, because of Allah, then you flow. Another of innovation he stopped was the cutting of the tree of Ridwan. Now, during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, there was this rumor which spread that Uthman ibn Anhu, who was sent by Prophet ﷺ to go to Makkah, inshallah we'll read the story in detail when we do the next course on Uthman ibn Anhu. A rumor spread that Uthman had been martyred in Makkah. So Rasulullah ﷺ gathered near, with the companions, they gathered near a tree called the tree of Ridwan. And Rasulullah ﷺ did something what we call a bay'ah, a pledge of allegiance, with every single companion, that they are now going to go to Makkah, fight against the Quraysh and the Mushriks, and take revenge for Uthman ibn Anhu's killing. So this tree is known as the tree of Ridwan. Very significant. But then what happened was that later on, Umar ibn Anhu started seeing people going and visiting this tree. It's like a monument. They were going, visiting the tree. Oh, this is where Prophet ﷺ and the companions did the bay'ah. So Umar ibn Anhu feared that people may then start worshipping the tree. Because that's how shirk starts. You go there firstly with the intention of, oh, I'm going to visit this pious person's grave. So you go there to visit, but later on you then start worshipping the grave. So similarly here, Umar ibn Anhu thought that, okay, they're going to visit now, but you never know, 10 years later, 20 years later, 100 years later, the people may start think of it to be something worship. So Umar ibn Anhu then ordered that this tree of Ridwan should be cut. So look at Umar radiallahu anhu, because he feared that people may go into shirk and idol like shirk and worshipping trees, he ordered that this particular tree be cut. Moving on to the next part of the slide. This is regarding Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu's respect for the Prophet's household, the Ahl Bayt. Now it's mentioned in Hadith that a sign of a true believer is that he has love for the Ahl Bayt, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's household, which includes obviously Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, his grandsons, his daughters, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, the Banu Hashim. They are known as the Ahl Bayt. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I said it's in a hadith as well, that a sign of a true believer is that he loves the Ahl Bayt. And Umar radiallahu anhu, like other companions, had total love and respect of the Ahl Bayt, of the people of the household. More love and more respect, brothers and sisters, he would give to the people of the household over his own family and over his own children. And I'm just going to narrate a couple of stories here. Like it's mentioned that whenever he would distribute food, like food from an animal, the head and the calves of the animal would be sent to the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the second story is very touching, the love he had for the people of the household, that once Umar radiallahu anhu invited Sayyiduna Hussein radiallahu anhu, i.e. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's grandson, Ali radiallahu anhu's son, to come to his house. As you can see from the slide there, that at that time Umar radiallahu anhu was in a meeting with Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. And whilst the meeting was going on, Umar radiallahu anhu's son, Ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Umar, knocked on the door to enter the house. But Umar radiallahu anhu refused. He refused, he said that, no, I don't want you to come now, I'm in a meeting. Now Hussein bin Ali radiallahu anhu was also near the house at that time. So when he saw Abdullah bin Umar not being given permission, Hussein bin Ali also walked away. Now when Umar radiallahu anhu asked him later regarding his non-appearance, that he asked Hussein bin Ali that, why didn't you come? Remember, I invited you to come to my house, why didn't you come? So Hazrat Hussein said, oh, because you were in a meeting, then I saw your son getting permission, he was refused entry, so that's why I thought that you're busy, you're not going to give me permission. So Umar radiallahu anhu then said, you have more right upon me than my own son. In other words, if you had knocked on the door, I would give you permission to come and see me. If my son knocks on the door, I wouldn't give him permission. But you are more dearer to me than my own son. Subhanallah, that's the love he, i.e. Umar radiallahu anhu, had for the people of the household, for the Ahl Bayt, that he was willing to sacrifice his own family for the family and for the sake of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and for his family. Now some other points about Umar radiallahu anhu's life. Another point here is regarding Umar radiallahu anhu would always take care of the needy, weak, and also the women as well. And in the first paragraph, he explains that women who had no kind of direct male relatives, it was like Umar radiallahu anhu took it as a responsibility to help and see and look after those women. So just an example, if a woman was a widow Umar anhu would make sure that he provides or supports this particular woman. Or if you want another scenario, could be if a woman was single meaning like say divorcee with children, who doesn't have any kind of male contacts or male like a husband to support her, then Umar anhu would kind of take it a duty upon himself to look after and to support this particular woman. Now obviously, some may argue and say, okay, let's all of us start doing this. Now obviously you need to understand, like sometimes you can't look after every single woman outside. And plus there may be that danger of temptation, fitna and so on. Umar anhu's case is slightly different because he was, remember brothers and sisters, he was the Amir al-Mu'mineen. So Umar anhu, whenever there was a woman who had no direct male relatives, Umar anhu did his best to basically look after them. Now what I've done here is I've just mentioned some stories regarding Umar anhu looking after the needy, the vulnerable. Not just women, but anyone who was in need, anyone who was weak and vulnerable, Hazrat Umar anhu would always look after them. Now some of these stories you may have heard or read before. Let's have a look at the first story. Now it's mentioned that one night, there was a companion called Talha bin Ubaidillah, very famous companion. He's one of the Ashara Mubashara, one of the 10 who has been guaranteed Jannah and paradise. So Hazrat Talha radiallahu anhu saw Umar radiallahu anhu entering a woman's house late at night, like entering her house, leaving, going to the next house and so on. Now you can imagine that if something like that was to happen nowadays, a man entering a woman's house, obviously, may Allah forbid, but what kind of, waswasas and insinuations we will have in our mind. So similarly, Hazrat Talha radiallahu anhu had some doubts that Umar radiallahu anhu, this late at night, 10, 11, 12, 1 o'clock, is entering a woman's house, then leaving that house, then going to another woman's house, Amir al-Mu'mineen, what's happening here? So the following day, now remember, obviously, everyone was scared of Umar, so obviously, Talha, I'm not going to ask Umar, what were you doing at this woman's house late at night? Obviously, the consequences may not have been very kind. So basically, Talha anhu, went and approached a woman and said that, I saw the Amir al-Mu'mineen come to your house tonight. Why did he come for? Subhanallah. The woman said that he came to my house because I'm old to bring me food. Not only that, but also to clean my house as well. Subhanallah. As an old woman, so obviously you can imagine that she couldn't do all the household chores properly or regularly. So Umar anhu would visit these women's house. He would get food for them, cook the food for them. Not only that, brothers and sisters, but also clean and sweep their house for them. Subhanallah. This is Umar anhu, his humbleness. Going back to one of the qualities I mentioned of Umar anhu, his humbleness. This is what you call humbleness. This is what you call humility. This is what you call sometimes not being pompous and arrogant all the time, but sometimes getting your hands dirty, doing, say, for example, sometimes a toilet cleaning, doing the safai of the toilet, doing the cleaning of the wuzu area. This is what Umar anhu would do. Another story, look at the next part, that similarly he would honor and look after women whose husbands are away in battles. So if the husbands have gone for jihad, have gone for battles, then Hazrat Umar anhu would look after those women because they were by themselves vulnerable. And not only that, he would also do their shopping and also do their outside chores. Outside chores meaning like, say, grazing the animals. Umar anhu would do that himself. But what I mean by shopping, because you may think, well, why can't women go shopping? No, the reason why he would do shopping for these women in particular is because their husbands weren't there. Sometimes they could be manipulated, and they could be manipulated in terms of they may give a higher price So Umar anhu would protect these women and he would actually do their shopping for them. Another point is, subhanAllah, of Umar anhu, his strong sense of faithfulness and loyalty, as I explained to the brothers right at the very beginning of today's course, that he did not think it was right that men fight bravely in battles one day and the next day they are forgotten. In other words, soldiers, his army members. He didn't think that it's right that these people are sacrificing their lives for you. They are doing everything for you. And then when they are hurt or injured or wounded or their arms or their legs have been blown off, that you then forget about themselves or let them look after themselves. And we're going to look at later that Umar anhu was the first one to introduce what we call nowadays a disability benefit. Nowadays we call it disability benefit, but in those days he was the first one to pioneer and to start this off. So any soldiers whose arms was blown off or his legs, whatever, Umar anhu would support that soldier and his family all the way until his death. This is like the caring nature of Umar anhu. Like people who were loyal to him, he would show that loyalty back to them. And this is something, brothers, just in general, we should always keep in mind. Nowadays, there's hardly any loyalty or sincerity. People do something for us, then we turn our face when they themselves are in need and they're asking for help. This is not the quality of being a Muslim. But Umar anhu had this quality in abundance, that people did something for him or for the state, he would never forget that, and he would never ever forget and leave them in trouble or leave them forgotten that no one looks after them anymore. Now, if you look at the next paragraph, a very heartfelt story of, there was once a group of soldiers. They came from Sham, Syria, to Medina. It was Asr time, so after the Asr, Umar anhu invited the soldiers to eat. So there was one particular soldier who was eating with his left hand. So Umar anhu kept on saying to him that, come on, eat with the right hand, it's sunnah. But this person is kept on eating with his left hand. Now after the meal, Umar anhu called him over and told him that, what is this like? You're eating with your left hand. I told you to eat with the right hand. Why are you still eating with your left hand for? So this person explained that, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, my right hand was blown away in a battle. That's why I can't eat with my right hand. So Umar anhu felt sorry and gave him a servant, a khadim. That this khadim and this servant will now look after you, will now care for you. The same way you risked your life and you cared for us, I'm now going to repay this favor by giving a khadim and a servant who will look after you. And on top of that, he gave that servant 5 camels as well. So this was, subhanAllah, the amazing true qualities, salient features of Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab al-Anhu. Now we're going to just pause here just a bit on the slides. Just go back onto the course book, page 6 on the course book regarding Abu Bakr al-Anhu's Khilafat. Obviously, when Abu Bakr al-Anhu fell ill, and you can just make a note of this in your course book if you want, it was Jumadul Akhirah or Jumadul Thani, Jumadul Thaniya. In 13th Hijri, Abu Bakr al-Anhu, he fell ill and he passed away. And as I explained before, brothers and sisters, that Abu Bakr al-Anhu nominated Umar al-Anhu to be the next Khalifa, to be the next successor. Abu Bakr anhu nominated Umar anhu himself. And I mentioned in our last course that there was one companion whose name was Talha bin Ubaydullah, whose story we just mentioned now. He was the only one who was against Umar anhu being the next Khalifa, because he thought Umar anhu to be too strict. It was too harsh. And you can't have someone who's harsh and strict being a Khalifa. But if you remember, brothers, I explained the reasons why Abu Bakr anhu chose Umar anhu, and I mentioned one reason early on in the afternoon, that because the world was opening up to the believers, that Abu Bakr anhu wanted someone strict like Umar anhu to keep and to tow everyone within the Sirat al-Mustaqim and within the straight path. There are some other things which I have mentioned about Umar anhu before meaning in the course, Abu Bakr anhu's course, that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, also mentioned some things about Umar anhu's behavior, that Umar anhu was the most who was affected by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's death. He didn't believe in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he has passed away. He even came out with some sentences which no one would imagine Umar anhu saying something like that. There's one phrase which Umar anhu said that, "O people, Prophet ﷺ hasn't passed away. He's not dead. He's gone to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the same way Musa alayhi salam left his people and went to meet Allah on Mount Sinai. For 40 days when he went to collect the revelation, and he left his people for 40 days, Umar anhu was saying to the people, "Oh, Prophet ﷺ hasn't passed away, he's not dead, he's still alive, and he's just gone to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he'll be back soon." So it was like Abu Bakr anhu, I mentioned in the previous course, he kept everyone at bay. He kind of told everyone, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. That many messengers have passed away before him. And if you worshipped Muhammad, then you should believe that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has passed away. But if you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then keep in mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever alive, He is all living, and He never ever passes away. So obviously when this verse was recited, Umar anhu felt better, and there was more kind of acknowledgement that, okay, life still moves on. And then, as I mentioned in the previous course, that Umar anhu and Abu Bakr anhu went to the courtyard of Sa'ida, Banu Sa'ida, and they decided on the first Amir, which was Abu Bakr anhu. So alhamdulillah, we looked at that, we touched on that on the previous course. Now moving on to the next part of the course regarding Umar anhu, more regarding his administration, but I think what we'll do is actually the Salat al-Maghrib time as well, so I think it's best to continue after Salat al-Maghrib. So inshallah we look at the next part of the course regarding his government, the way he ruled over people. وَمَا عَلَيْنَا إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ وَاللَّهُ بِالتَّوْفِيقِ وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ.